"Dad, you're always the last one as usual," my children said to me, but I was the only one who flew away in a helicopter. My name is Harold Hank Peterson, and at 65 years old, I never thought I'd be telling this story. For most folks around Yakima, Washington, I'm just the old farmer who owns 3,000 acres of apple orchards stretching across the Yakima Valley. They see my worn Carhartt overalls, my calloused hands, and my beat-up Ford pickup, and they think they know everything about me. What they don't know is that those orchards are worth $47 million. And what happened last month changed everything I thought I knew about my family. It was a crisp October morning when the helicopter landed in my front yard. The sound of those rotors spinning cut through the autumn air like a chainsaw, drowning out the usual sounds of my property, the distant hum of irrigation systems, the soft lowing of cattle, and the whisper of wind through the apple trees that had been my life's work for the past 4 decades. I was sitting on my porch, sipping black coffee from my favorite mug, a chipped ceramic thing that said, "World's Greatest Dad," that my youngest daughter Sarah had given me 15 years ago, back when she still looked at me with something resembling respect. Now, at 32, she looked at me like I was an embarrassment she had to tolerate at family gatherings. The helicopter was a sleek black Bell 429, the kind you see in movies. As it touched down on my front lawn, crushing some of Margaret's prized roses, I couldn't help but smile. Margaret, my wife of 38 years, was going to have a fit about those roses. She'd spent more on landscaping this year than most people in Yakima made in a decade. Margaret burst through the front door, her perfectly styled blonde hair whipping in the rotor wash. Even at 62, she maintained the kind of polished appearance that screamed money, designer clothes, professional manicures, and that particular way of holding herself that said she belonged in Seattle's social circles, not on a working farm in eastern Washington. "Harold!" she shouted over the noise, using my full name the way she did when she was particularly annoyed. "What in God's name is that thing doing in our yard?" Before I could answer, 2 men in dark suits stepped out of the helicopter. The pilot remained at the controls, and I could see him checking his instruments, preparing for what I knew would be a quick departure. One of the suited men approached the porch, his expensive shoes completely inappropriate for walking across freshly turned soil. "Mr. Peterson?" he called out, pulling out a leather portfolio. "I'm James Whitman from Whitman, Crenshaw and Associates in Seattle. We need to speak with you about the Jameson Estate." The Jameson Estate. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 43 years, not since I left Seattle, with nothing but a suitcase and a secret that I swore I'd take to my grave. Margaret's face went pale, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, fear maybe, or recognition. She knew that name, even though I'd never told her the whole story. "Who's Jameson?" This came from my oldest son, Michael, who had just pulled up in his BMW. At 35, Michael was everything I wasn't: polished, educated, and utterly convinced that his father was a simple farmer who'd gotten lucky with some land investments. He worked as a financial advisor in Spokane and never missed an opportunity to remind me that he had a master's degree from Washington State University. Behind him, my middle child David emerged from his Tesla. At 33, David had followed his brother's lead in treating me like the family's lovable but dim patriarch. He ran a tech startup in Seattle and spoke in buzzwords that I pretended not to understand. Both of my sons were dressed in their usual expensive casual wear, designer jeans and polo shirts that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "This is a private matter," Mr. Whitman said, glancing around at my assembled family. "Perhaps we could speak inside. Anything you have to say to my husband, you can say in front of his family," Margaret declared, stepping beside me with that imperious tone she used when dealing with what she considered the help. She'd been using that tone with me more and more lately. Sarah's Lexus pulled up just then. And she stepped out, wearing her real estate agent blazer and the perpetually exasperated expression she wore whenever she had to visit the farm. At 32, she'd made it clear that she considered my lifestyle an embarrassment to her professional image. She specialized in high-end properties in Bellevue and often joked with her friends about her simple farmer father who didn't understand the finer things in life. Great. Another circus at Dad's place, she muttered, but loud enough for everyone to hear. What's with the helicopter? Are we filming a reality show about Farmer Takes Seattle? The laughter that followed felt like acid in my stomach. My own children, the people I'd worked 60-hour weeks to provide for, who I'd sent to the best schools, who lived in houses I'd helped them buy, they were laughing at me. Again, Mr. Whitman cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Peterson, I really think— Just say what you came to say, I interrupted, setting down my coffee mug with more force than necessary. My family seems to think I'm too simple to understand anything complicated anyway. There was something in my voice that made everyone stop laughing. Maybe it was the edge of bitterness that I'd been keeping buried for years. Or maybe it was the way I was looking at each of them, really looking at them, for the first time in a long while. Very well, Mr. Whitman said, opening his portfolio. Mr. Peterson, I'm here to inform you that you are the sole beneficiary of the estate of Jonathan Alexander Jameson III. Mr. Jameson passed away 6 weeks ago, and his will specifically names you as inheritor of his entire estate, which includes properties in Seattle, San Francisco, and New York, as well as liquid assets totaling approximately $230 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the helicopter seemed quieter. Margaret's face cycled through a range of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and something that looked almost like betrayal. Harold, who is Jonathan Jameson? My children were staring at me like I'd just told them I was an alien from Mars. Michael's mouth was actually hanging open, which was particularly satisfying, given how often he'd lectured me about proper business etiquette. There must be some mistake, David said, pulling out his phone as if he could Google his way to understanding. My father is a farmer. He's never mentioned knowing anyone named Jameson. No mistake, Mr. Whitman replied, pulling out several legal documents. I have Mr. Jameson's will right here, along with DNA confirmation that was conducted 3 months ago. Mr. Peterson, you may not remember, but you provided a DNA sample when you were hospitalized for that heart episode in July. I remembered. I'd thought it was just routine testing. I should have known Jonathan would find a way, even from the grave. Dad, Sarah said, her voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. Dad, what's going on? For 43 years, I'd kept Jonathan's secret. For 43 years, I'd let my family think I was just Hank the farmer, a simple man who'd gotten lucky with some apple orchards. I'd endured their condescending smiles, their little jokes, their obvious embarrassment at having such an unsophisticated father and husband. The truth, I said quietly, is that Jonathan Jameson was my brother. The word brother hung in the air like smoke from a campfire. Margaret actually stumbled backward, catching herself against the porch railing. That's impossible, Michael said. You don't have any family. You've always told us you were an only child. I told you my parents died when I was young, which was true. I told you I had no family left, which became true when I walked away from my old life in Seattle. I stood up from my chair, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was looking down at my children instead of the other way around. Mr. Peterson, Mr. Whitman continued, there's more. Mr. Jameson left specific instructions. He wanted you to know that he never forgot what you did for him, or what you gave up. He said to tell you that he'd kept track of your life, your family, your success with the orchards. He was proud of you. Sarah was crying now, though I wasn't sure if it was from shock or something else. Dad, I don't understand. If you had a brother with that much money, why didn't I ever what, Sarah? Why didn't I live off his wealth? Why didn't I take the easy path? I looked at each of them, my wife, my children, and felt a strange mixture of love and disappointment. Because I chose this life. I chose to build something with my own hands. Margaret found her voice then, and it was sharp with anger. You lied to us, Harold. For 38 years you've been lying to us. No, I said quietly. I've been protecting us. There's a difference. Mr. Whitman was checking his watch. Mr. Peterson, I hate to rush this, but we have several legal matters to discuss, and frankly, this level of wealth requires immediate attention. There are properties to inspect, investments to review, charitable foundations to consider. Mr. Jameson's businesses won't run themselves. Businesses? David asked, his startup-trained mind already shifting into gear. What kind of businesses? Jameson Holdings owns commercial real estate throughout the Pacific Northwest, technology investments, renewable energy projects, and several restaurant chains. Your father's brother was quite the entrepreneur. I watched my family process this information. I could almost see the calculations happening behind their eyes, the recalibration of their entire understanding of who I was. The man they'd been treating like a simple farmer was suddenly connected to a fortune that dwarfed anything they'd ever imagined. There's something else, Mr. Whitman said, pulling out a sealed envelope. Mr. Jameson left this for you personally. He insisted you read it before making any decisions about the inheritance. My hands shook slightly as I took the envelope. Jonathan's handwriting on the front was exactly as I remembered it. For Harry, the brother who saved my life. Nobody had called me Harry in over 4 decades. I need a moment, I said, and without waiting for permission from my own family, I walked toward the apple orchards, where I did my best thinking. Behind me, I could hear Margaret trying to take charge of the situation, peppering Mr. Whitman with questions about tax implications and legal procedures. My children were talking over each other, their voices carrying that excited edge that came with sudden windfalls. But all I could think about was the last time I'd seen Jonathan, 43 years ago in a Seattle hospital room, when I'd made a decision that changed both our lives forever. The letter felt heavy in my hands, heavier than paper and ink had any right to feel. As I walked between the rows of apple trees that I'd planted, pruned, and tended with my own hands, I realized that everything was about to change. The life I'd built, the man I'd become, the family I thought I knew, it was all about to be turned upside down, and somewhere in the distance, that helicopter was still waiting. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to ask you something. If this story is hitting you the way it's hitting me just telling it, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Stories like this one, real stories about real families and the secrets that can tear them apart or bring them together. They need to be heard. Your support helps me keep sharing them. Now, back to that letter that was about to change everything I thought I knew about my life. I found my usual thinking spot beneath the oldest apple tree on the property, a Gravenstein that I'd planted the first year Margaret and I moved to Yakima. Its trunk was thick enough now that I could lean against it comfortably, and its branches had shaded 3 decades of difficult conversations I'd had with myself. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive paper with Jonathan's law firm's embossed letterhead. Inside, I found 3 pages covered in my brother's familiar handwriting, still neat and precise after all these years, though I could see the slight tremor that age had added to his pen strokes. Harry, if you're reading this, then I'm dead, and you're probably standing somewhere on that farm of yours, wondering how your life got so complicated so fast. I know you, big brother. Even after 43 years, I know you. First, let me say what I should have said the last time we spoke. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I put you through. I'm sorry for the choice you had to make. And I'm sorry it took me dying to find the courage to reach out, but I'm not sorry you made the choice you did. It saved my life, Harry, not just that night in the hospital, but every day after. Every success I've had, every life I've been able to touch through my businesses and philanthropy, every good thing that came from the years you gave me. It's all because you were brave enough to do what needed to be done. My hands were shaking now. I could hear voices from the house. Margaret's sharp tones mixing with my children's excited chatter as they peppered the lawyer with questions. They sounded so far away, like they belonged to a different world entirely. I know you think I abandoned you. I know you think I took the easy path while you started over with nothing. But Harry, I never stopped watching. I never stopped caring. I know about the orchards, about Margaret, about your children. I know Michael graduated summa cum laude, that David's startup is actually doing better than he lets on, and that Sarah just closed the biggest real estate deal in Bellevue history last month. I know Margaret redecorated the house 3 times in the past 5 years, and I know she's been taking those art classes in Seattle every Thursday, not because she loves art, but because she's trying to find herself again after 38 years of being a farmer's wife when she always dreamed of being something more. And I know they don't see you. Harry, I know they treat you like you're less than you are. I've watched from a distance as your own family made you feel small, and it's broken my heart every single day. I had to stop reading. The words were blurring together. Partly from the tears I didn't want to admit I was crying, and partly from the rage building in my chest. Jonathan had been watching us. For 43 years, he'd been keeping tabs on our lives while I thought he'd forgotten we ever existed. Dad? I looked up to see Sarah approaching hesitantly. She'd taken off her blazer, and without it, she looked younger somehow, more like the little girl who used to follow me around the orchards, asking endless questions about everything. Dad, are you okay? You've been out here for 20 minutes, and Mom is losing her mind. She's got the lawyer cornered by the kitchen counter, demanding to know about tax implications and property transfers. And your brothers? Sarah sat down beside me on the ground, not caring that her expensive pants would get dirty. It was the first time in years she'd done something like that, chosen comfort over appearance. Michael's on his phone with his firm, trying to figure out wealth management strategies. David's already talking about investment opportunities. She paused, picking at the grass. Dad, none of us handled this very well, did we? I folded the letter carefully, not ready to finish it yet. How do you mean? The way we reacted. The things we said. It's just, she struggled for words. It's just that you've always been, Dad. Farmer Dad. The guy who wears the same overalls every day and drives that beat-up truck and gets excited about apple harvests and crop rotations. And that embarrassed you. It wasn't a question. And Sarah had the grace to look ashamed. Not embarrassed exactly. It's more like we never saw you. We saw this version of you that we created in our heads, the simple farmer who was lucky with land investments. We never asked about your life before us. We never wondered why a man who could run 3,000 acres of orchards and manage dozens of seasonal workers and negotiate contracts with major distributors might be more complex than he appeared. I studied my youngest daughter, seeing her clearly for maybe the first time in years. When did you figure that out? About 5 minutes after that helicopter landed. Dad, nobody sends helicopters and lawyers with DNA test results to simple farmers. And the way you handled that lawyer, you weren't surprised. Shocked, maybe, but not surprised. You knew something like this might happen eventually. She was right, of course. I'd always known Jonathan would reach out eventually, one way or another. I just hoped it would be while he was still alive, so we could have the conversation we should have had decades ago. Sarah, what do you remember about your grandfather? Grandpa Peterson? Nothing, really. You always said he died when you were young, and you didn't like talking about it. My father's name wasn't Peterson, I said quietly. It was Jameson, Jonathan Alexander Jameson, Jr., And my name wasn't Harold Peterson when I was born. It was Henry Alexander Jameson. Sarah's face went white. Harry? The letter called you Harry. Jonathan and I were twins, Sarah. Fraternal twins, born 3 minutes apart. I was older, which meant I was supposed to inherit everything. The businesses, the properties, the family name, all of it. That was the way our father had it set up in his will. What happened? Before I could answer, Michael appeared at the edge of the orchard, his phone still pressed to his ear. Dad, you need to come back to the house. This lawyer says there are decisions that need to be made today, and Mom is about to have a complete— In a minute, I called back. Dad, this is serious. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here. You can't just sit under a tree and— I said in a minute. The sharpness in my voice surprised all of us, including me. Michael actually took a step backward. Okay, he said carefully. Okay, but Dad, whatever happened between you and this Jameson guy, whatever this is all about, we're your family. We're here for you. After he left, Sarah turned to me with tears in her eyes. We haven't been, though, have we? We haven't been here for you. Not really. I reached over and took her hand, something I hadn't done since she was a little girl. Tell me something, sweetheart. When's the last time any of you asked me about my day? When's the last time you asked about the orchards, or how I'm feeling, or what I'm thinking about? She started to answer, then stopped. I watched her mentally reviewing conversations, family dinners, phone calls. The realization hit her like a physical blow. We don't, do we? We talk at you. We tell you about our jobs, our problems, our successes. But we never ask about yours. And why do you think that is? Because we assumed there wasn't anything interesting to ask about. The words came out as barely a whisper. Oh, Dad, we've been terrible. Not terrible, just young, and maybe I let you think I was simpler than I am because it was easier than explaining why I chose this life over the one I was born into. I unfolded Jonathan's letter again, ready to finish reading what my brother had wanted me to know. The money comes with a condition. Harry, not a legal condition. It's yours, no matter what you decide, but a moral one. I've spent 43 years building something I hope you'll be proud of. The businesses aren't just about profit. We fund scholarships for kids from farming families who want to go to college. We've built affordable housing projects throughout Washington and Oregon. We've invested in renewable energy initiatives that are actually making a difference. I need you to decide if you want to take over or if you want me to have donated it all to charity. I couldn't make that choice for you. It has to be yours. But Harry, if you decide to take it on, I need you to know what you'd be getting into. This isn't just about managing money. It's about having influence, having power, having people depend on you for their livelihoods. It's about board meetings and charity galas, and all the things you ran away from. 43 years ago, it's about becoming Jonathan Alexander Jameson again. The helicopter pilot has instructions to take you to Seattle if you want to see what I built. The offices, the projects, the life I lived, because you gave me the chance to live it. You don't have to decide today, but I hope you'll at least come and look. Your brother always, Jonathan P.S. Tell your family the truth, Harry. All of it. They deserve to know who you really are, and you deserve to be seen for who you've always been. Don't let them make you feel small anymore. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Sarah was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen since she was little. Complete attention, genuine concern, real love without any reservation or embarrassment. Dad, what did the letter say? It said that your uncle spent 43 years trying to make up for something that wasn't his fault. I stood up, brushing dirt off my jeans. And it said that I have a decision to make. As we walked back toward the house, Sarah slipped her arm through mine. Dad, whatever you decide, I want you to know something. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I forgot to show it somewhere along the way. I know, sweetheart. But maybe it's time we all started showing each other who we really are. The helicopter was still waiting when we reached the house, its rotors spinning lazily in the afternoon sun. Margaret was standing on the porch with her arms crossed, clearly frustrated by whatever conversation she'd been having with Mr. Whitman. Michael and David were huddled together near David's Tesla, both of them typing furiously on their phones. "Harold," Margaret called out as we approached, "this man says you need to make some kind of decision about going to Seattle. Today. He says there are business matters that can't wait." Mr. Whitman approached us, looking professionally apologetic. "Mr. Peterson, I understand this is overwhelming, but there are several time-sensitive issues. Board meetings scheduled for tomorrow, contracts that need signatures, and frankly, there are people who've been waiting 6 weeks to know what happens to their jobs." Jobs? Jameson Holdings employs over 3,000 people directly, and our various investments and partnerships affect thousands more. Your brother's death left a leadership vacuum, and the board needs to know if you're taking over or if they should proceed with alternate succession plans. 3,000 people. I thought about the 18 seasonal workers I employed during harvest season, and how responsible I felt for their livelihoods. 3,000 was almost incomprehensible. How long would I need to be in Seattle? That depends on you. A few hours to review everything and make an informed decision, or indefinitely if you choose to take on your brother's role. I looked at my family, my wife of 38 years, who was staring at me like I was a stranger, my children who were seeing me clearly for the first time in their lives, and my youngest daughter whose arm was still linked with mine. "I'll go," I said finally. "But not alone." Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Harold, I can't just drop everything, and not you," I said quietly. Sarah's coming with me. Dad?" Sarah looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. You understand real estate, you understand business, and more importantly, you understand what it means to build something from the ground up." I looked at my other children. "Michael, David, I need you both to stay here and take care of your mother. And I need you to think about something while I'm gone." "What's that?" Michael asked. "I need you to think about whether you want to be part of whatever comes next, or if you want to keep pretending your father is someone he's never been." The helicopter ride to Seattle was Sarah's first time in an aircraft smaller than a commercial jet, and watching her face pressed to the window as we flew over the Cascade Mountains reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with being a father in the first place. She pointed out landmarks, asked the pilot questions about the controls, and generally acted like the curious, engaged person she'd been before life taught her to be too cool for enthusiasm. "Dad," she said as the Seattle skyline came into view, "are you scared?" "Terrified," I admitted. "But maybe it's time I stopped letting fear make my decisions for me." Below us, the city stretched out like a promise or a threat. Somewhere down there was the life I'd walked away from, the empire my brother had built in my absence. And the truth my family was finally ready to hear. The helicopter banked toward a landing pad atop a gleaming tower in downtown Seattle, and I realized that in the next few hours I was either going to become one of the wealthiest men in the Pacific Northwest, or I was going to walk away from it all again, but this time I wouldn't be walking away alone. The Jameson Holdings building was everything I remembered about my old life, but bigger. 43 stories of glass and steel reaching toward the Seattle sky like a monument to ambition. As our helicopter settled onto the rooftop landing pad, I could see the Olympic Mountains in the distance and the Puget Sound stretching out like a gray mirror. Sarah gripped my arm as we stepped out of the aircraft. "Dad, this is incredible. Your brother owned all of this?" "We owned it," I corrected quietly. Before I walked away, Mr. Whitman led us to a private elevator that descended directly to the executive floor. The walls were lined with photographs, groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, charity events, and in many of them I could see Jonathan, older now but still recognizable, still carrying himself with that confident smile that had gotten us both into so much trouble when we were young. "Mr. Jameson's office is just down the hall," Whitman said as the elevator doors opened. "Everything has been preserved exactly as he left it, per his instructions." The hallway was lined with awards and commendations, humanitarian awards, business excellence recognition, environmental leadership honors. This wasn't just a successful company. It was a company that had tried to make a difference. "Dad," Sarah whispered, "look at this." She was pointing to a photograph I hadn't noticed at first. It was from about 10 years ago, based on Jonathan's appearance, and it showed him at what looked like a farm workers' appreciation dinner. The caption read, "Jonathan Jameson III honors the agricultural workers who feed our communities." "He never forgot where we came from," I murmured. Jonathan's office was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. But what stopped me cold was the wall behind his desk. It was covered with photographs of apple orchards, my apple orchards. Pictures that had to have been taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, showing my property through the seasons. Spring blossoms, summer growth, autumn harvest, winter pruning. "He was watching you," Sarah said softly. "All these years he was really watching you." But it was the desk that nearly broke my heart. Sitting in a place of honor, right where Jonathan would have seen it every day, was a framed photograph of the two of us from when we were 22. We were standing in front of the original Jameson Holdings building, much smaller then, on the day our father died and left us everything. We looked so young, so confident, so certain that we could conquer the world together. "Mr. Peterson," Whitman said gently, "there's someone here who's been waiting to meet you." An elderly woman entered the office, probably in her late 70s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and eyes that looked remarkably familiar. "Henry," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Oh, Henry, you look exactly like your father." I stared at her, my mind racing. "I'm sorry, do we—" "Mrs. Eleanor Jameson," she said, extending her hand. "Your father's sister." "Your aunt," the world tilted sideways. "That's impossible. Dad said he didn't have any siblings. Your father said a lot of things that weren't true, Henry, just like you've been doing for 43 years. Her smile was gentle but knowing. "Jonathan found me about 15 years ago. He'd been looking for family, for connections to the past. When he discovered I was still alive, still in Seattle, he brought me into the company as a consultant." Sarah was looking back and forth between us. "Dad, you have an aunt." "Apparently I have an aunt who's been working for my brother's company for 15 years, I said, still trying to process this information. Eleanor moved to one of the chairs facing Jonathan's desk. "Sit down, both of you. It's time you knew the whole story, not just the parts your father and Jonathan chose to tell you." We sat, and Eleanor folded her hands in her lap like she was preparing for a difficult conversation. "Your father, Jonathan Alexander Jameson, Jr., was not a good man, Henry. He was brilliant, successful, wealthy, but not good. When you and Jonathan were born, he saw you as his legacy, 2 sons to carry on the family empire. But he also saw you as competition for each other." "What do you mean?" I asked. "He deliberately pitted you against each other, made you compete for his approval, for his attention, for his love. He told Jonathan that being born 3 minutes later made him worthless unless he could prove he was better than you. He told you that being the elder son meant you had to be perfect, that any weakness would cost you everything." Sarah leaned forward. "That's horrible. It was worse than horrible. It was calculated psychological torture designed to ensure that his sons would never truly trust each other, never be close enough to unite against him." Eleanor's voice was steady, but I could see the old anger in her eyes. "And it worked until the night everything changed." I knew what night she was talking about. "Even after 43 years, I could still smell the smoke, still hear the screams, still feel the heat of the flames against my face. "The warehouse fire," I said quietly. "Tell her," Eleanor said, nodding toward Sarah. "Tell her what really happened that night." Sarah was watching me with wide eyes, and I realized that this was the moment when I would either continue protecting her from the truth or trust her with the darkest secret of my life. It was March 15th, 1981. I began, my voice sounding strange and distant even to my own ears. Jonathan and I were 22, and we'd been working for Dad for about a year since college. The company wasn't as big then, but we had several warehouses, including one down by the waterfront where we stored equipment and supplies. There had been problems with that warehouse, electrical issues, safety violations that Dad kept putting off fixing because repairs would cost money. Jonathan and I had both complained about it, but Dad said it was fine, that we were being paranoid. I stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the Seattle skyline, but seeing the past instead of the present. That night, there was a problem with one of our biggest clients, a contract dispute that needed immediate attention, and Dad sent both Jonathan and me to the warehouse to retrieve some files. It was about 10 o'clock, raining, and we were both exhausted from working 16-hour days. Sarah was completely still, listening with the kind of attention I hadn't seen from her since she was a child. We were in the office section of the warehouse when we smelled smoke. The electrical system had finally failed, and fire was spreading through the storage area. We tried to get out through the main exit, but it was blocked. The only other way out was through the loading dock, but that meant going through the fire. Both of you made it out, though. No, sweetheart. We didn't both make it out. Eleanor was watching me with compassion, and something that might have been pride. "Tell her the rest, Henry." A beam fell and trapped Jonathan. His leg was pinned, and the fire was spreading fast. I could have gotten out, should have gotten out. The smart thing, the safe thing, would have been to get out and call for help. But you didn't. I couldn't leave him. Despite everything Dad had done to turn us against each other, despite all the competition and resentment, he was my brother. My twin brother. So I went back. I turned away from the window to face Sarah directly. I managed to free Jonathan, but getting him out meant carrying him through the worst of the fire. By the time we made it to the loading dock, we were both badly burned, but Jonathan was unconscious and barely breathing. The paramedics said he might not make it. Brain damage from smoke inhalation, third-degree burns over 30% of his body, internal injuries from the falling beam. He was in a coma for 2 weeks. Sarah's eyes were filled with tears. "Dad, that's not something to be ashamed of. You saved his life. That's not the end of the story." I sat back down, suddenly feeling every one of my 65 years. While Jonathan was in the hospital fighting for his life, Dad was fighting a different battle. The insurance investigation found that the warehouse fire was caused by negligence, his negligence. The safety violations, the deferred maintenance, all of it was going to come out. Eleanor picked up the story. "Your father was facing criminal charges, massive lawsuits, and the potential destruction of everything he'd built. But he found a loophole. The company's insurance had a clause that voided coverage if the owners were found criminally liable. But if the negligence could be attributed to an employee rather than an owner, the coverage would hold." Sarah was beginning to understand. "Oh no, Dad, he didn't." He offered me a choice. Take responsibility for the safety violations, accept criminal liability for the fire, and go to prison for manslaughter, because a security guard had died in the fire trying to help us. Or watch the company collapse, leaving Jonathan with millions in medical bills and no way to pay them. But you were his son. You were going to inherit everything, not if I was a convicted felon. Dad made it clear that if I took the blame, I'd be disinherited completely. Jonathan would inherit everything if he recovered. If he didn't recover, the company would be liquidated to pay his medical bills. The silence in the office was deafening. Through the windows, I could see the Seattle skyline that had once been mine. That should have been mine, that I'd walked away from to save my brother's life twice, once from the fire and once from financial ruin. "So you took the deal," Sarah whispered. "I took the deal. I pled guilty to negligent manslaughter and criminal negligence. I served 18 months in prison. When I got out, I changed my name to Harold Peterson, moved to Yakima, and started over with nothing. And Jonathan never knew?" Eleanor answered that question. "Jonathan was told that his brother died in the fire trying to save him. Your father convinced everyone, including the hospital staff, that Henry had died a hero's death. When Jonathan finally woke up, he was told he was the sole survivor and the sole heir to the family fortune." Sarah looked like she'd been physically struck. "He spent 43 years thinking you were dead? He spent 43 years building something worthy of his brother's sacrifice," Eleanor said. "Every success, every charitable project, every life he touched, it was all in memory of the brother he thought he'd lost." "But then how did he find out the truth?" I pulled out my phone and showed Sarah a news article from 3 months ago. "Local farmer suffers heart attack, makes full recovery. The hospital required DNA testing for some procedure during my recovery. Jonathan had been doing periodic searches for anyone with Jameson DNA, hoping to find distant relatives. When my sample hit the system, it was a perfect match for his. He knew immediately that his dead brother was alive, and had been living 3 hours away for 4 decades, Eleanor added. The shock nearly killed him. But instead of confronting you directly, he hired private investigators to learn everything about your life. He wanted to understand why you'd let him think you were dead." Sarah was crying now. Not the delicate tears of someone trying to preserve their makeup, but the raw, ugly crying of someone whose entire world had just been turned upside down. "Dad, you went to prison for something that wasn't your fault. You gave up a fortune to save Uncle Jonathan's life. You've spent 43 years letting people think you were just a simple farmer when you're actually—" She gestured around the office. "When you're actually this. I'm actually a man who made the only choice he could live with," I said quietly. "And I'd make the same choice again." Eleanor stood up and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. "Jonathan spent the last months of his life trying to figure out how to make this right. He couldn't give you back 43 years, but he could give you the choice of what comes next." She handed me the folder. Inside were documents transferring complete control of Jameson Holdings to me, but also alternative plans for liquidating everything and donating the proceeds to various charities. He wanted you to know that whatever you choose, he was proud of the man you became. He was proud of your farm, your family, the life you built from nothing. But he also wanted you to know that this— She gestured around the office. "This was always meant to be yours, too." My phone buzzed with a text message from Margaret. "Harold, the kids and I have been talking. We need to have a family meeting when you get home. There are things we need to say." I showed the message to Sarah, who smiled through her tears. "I think we broke Mom and the boys' brains a little bit." "Good," I said. It was time. Eleanor was watching me carefully. "So what will you decide, Henry? Will you take back what was always yours, or will you walk away again?" I looked around Jonathan's office, my brother's office, at the photographs of my orchards, the awards for humanitarian work, the evidence of a life spent trying to honor a sacrifice he'd never known was made. Then I looked at Sarah, my youngest daughter, who was seeing me clearly for the first time in her life and loving me not despite my choices, but because of them. "I'll take it," I said finally. "But not the way Jonathan ran it. And not alone." Sarah's eyes widened. "Dad, Jameson Holdings is going to need new leadership, people who understand both the business world and what it means to work with your hands, to build something from nothing. I turned to face her directly. Sarah, how would you feel about being the COO of a multi-billion-dollar company? Dad, I sell houses in Bellevue. I don't know anything about running a corporation. You know about sales, negotiation, market analysis, and customer relations. You know about building trust and closing deals. Most importantly, you know what it means to earn something through your own efforts. I smiled at her. Besides, you'd be working with your father, and I happen to have 43 years of experience running a successful agricultural business. Eleanor clapped her hands together. Jonathan would have loved this. He always said the company needed someone who understood both sides of the equation, the boardroom and the break room. As we prepared to leave the office, I took one last look at the photograph of Jonathan and me when we were young and thought we owned the world. We'd both been right in a way. We had owned the world. We just hadn't known that sometimes the only way to keep something is to be willing to give it away. The helicopter ride back to Yakima gave me time to think about what I was going to say to Margaret, Michael, and David. How do you explain to your family that everything they thought they knew about you was both completely wrong and completely true? How do you tell them that the simple farmer they'd been embarrassed by was actually the man who'd given up an empire to save his brother's life? But as we flew over the Cascades toward home, I realized that maybe the explanation didn't matter as much as the choice that lay ahead. We could be the family we'd always been, distant, polite, slightly embarrassed by each other. Or we could be the family we had the potential to become, honest, connected, proud of each other's real accomplishments instead of the facades we'd created. As the helicopter settled onto my front lawn for the second time that day, I could see Margaret, Michael, and David waiting on the porch. They looked different somehow, less certain, more open, like people who were ready to have a conversation they should have started years ago. Sarah squeezed my hand as we walked toward the house. Dad, are you ready for this? I looked at my family, at my home, at the apple orchards that I'd built with my own hands and would always love, no matter what else happened. I've been ready for this conversation for 43 years, I said. It's time they knew who their father really is. The walk from the helicopter to the house felt like the longest 100 yards of my life. Margaret, Michael, and David were standing on the porch, and I could see in their faces that the past few hours had changed them too. The easy certainty they'd always had about who I was had been shattered, and now they were looking at me like they were seeing a stranger. Margaret spoke first. Harold, Henry, whoever you are now, we need to talk. I know we do. We gathered in the living room, the same room where we'd shared thousands of family moments. But everything felt different now. The comfortable furniture, the family photos on the mantel, even the afternoon light streaming through the windows, it all seemed to belong to a different family. A family that had existed before this morning changed everything. Margaret sat in her usual chair, but she was perched on the edge like she was ready to flee at any moment. Michael and David flanked the couch, both of them looking like they were preparing for a business meeting rather than a family conversation. Sarah took the chair next to mine, a show of solidarity that meant more to me than she could know. So, Margaret said, her voice carefully controlled, let me see if I understand this correctly. For 38 years of marriage, you've been lying to me about who you are. I've been protecting you from who I was, I corrected. There's a difference, is there? Because right now it feels like my entire marriage has been built on a lie. David leaned forward. Dad, and I'm still going to call you Dad because I don't know what else to call you. Why didn't you ever tell us? Why did you let us think what? That your father was just a simple farmer who got lucky with some land? That he was someone you could patronize and condescend to because he didn't understand the sophisticated world you all lived in? The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but 43 years of swallowed pride and endured dismissal were finally finding their voice. Michael flinched. Dad, we never meant to. Yes, you did. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. You meant every joke about simple farmer Dad. You meant every eye roll when I talked about the orchards. You meant every time you made me feel like I was an embarrassment to this family. Harold, Margaret's voice was sharp. That's not fair, isn't it? Margaret, when's the last time you asked me about my work? Really asked. Not just polite conversation while you checked your phone. When's the last time any of you showed genuine interest in the thing I've spent my life building? The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah cleared her throat. Dad's right. We've been awful. All of us. I didn't know, Michael said quietly. I mean, I knew the farm was successful, but I never thought, you never thought your old man might be more than the sum of his overalls and work boots, I finished. You never considered that a man who built a multi-million-dollar agricultural operation from nothing might have other skills, other experiences, other depths. David was staring at his hands. The way we talked about you to our friends, the jokes we made. Oh God, Dad, we were horrible. You were young, I said, my anger beginning to fade into something that felt more like sadness. And maybe I let you be horrible because it was easier than explaining why I chose this life. Margaret stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the orchards. So explain it now. Make me understand how my husband of 38 years could keep something this enormous from me. I moved to stand beside her, both of us looking out at the apple trees that had been my refuge and my redemption. When I got out of prison, Margaret, I was 24 years old and I had nothing. No money, no family, no future that I could see. I was a convicted felon who'd lost everything to save his brother's life, and that brother thought I was dead. You could have told Jonathan the truth when he recovered. And then what? Let him live with the guilt of knowing that his brother went to prison so he could inherit a fortune. Let him know that our father was a manipulative bastard who pitted his sons against each other for his own twisted reasons. I shook my head. Jonathan was rebuilding his life, his body, his mind. He needed to believe his brother died a hero, not that he lived as a criminal. Sarah joined us at the window. But Dad, you weren't a criminal. You were innocent. I was legally guilty, sweetheart. I signed the papers, I made the plea, I served the time. And when I got out, I made a choice to become someone new. Harold Peterson was a man who could build something honest, something real, something that belonged to him and no one else. I turned away from the window to face my family. The orchards, this house, the life we built here, it's all real. It's all mine. I earned it with my own hands, my own sweat, my own decisions. It doesn't belong to the Jameson family fortune, or my father's legacy, or anyone else's expectations. It belongs to us. Michael was looking at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes for years. Respect. Dad, what you built here, it's incredible. I never really understood the scope of it before today. 3,000 acres, David added. 43 years of building something from nothing. That's actually more impressive than inheriting wealth. Margaret turned from the window. So what happens now? Do you become Jonathan Jameson again? Do we move to Seattle and become, society people? That's up to all of you, I said. The inheritance is mine, but the choice of what to do with it belongs to this family. Our family. What do you want to do? Sarah asked. I thought about that for a long moment, looking at each of them. My wife, who was seeing me clearly for the first time in decades. My sons, who were finally asking me what I thought, instead of telling me what they thought. My daughter, who had already chosen to stand with me. I want to honor what Jonathan built, but I want to do it our way. The company needs leadership that understands both wealth and work, both privilege and sacrifice. It needs people who know what it means to earn something and what it costs to lose it. You want us to help you run it, Michael said. It wasn't a question. I want us to decide together whether that's what we want. Michael, you understand finance and wealth management. David, you understand technology and innovation. Sarah already understands real estate and negotiation. And Margaret, I looked at my wife, really looked at her. Margaret, you spent 38 years managing our life, our social obligations, our family dynamics. You understand people and relationships and how to make things work. And you, she asked, what do you bring to this family business? I bring 43 years of making hard choices and living with the consequences. I bring the knowledge that money is just a tool, not a goal. And I bring the certainty that family is the only thing that really matters, even when that family drives you crazy. The room fell quiet. Outside, I could hear the irrigation system cycling on, the sound of water feeding the apple trees that had fed us for 4 decades. There's something else, I said finally. If we do this, if we take on Jonathan's legacy, it can't be about the money. It has to be about the work. The scholarships, the affordable housing, the environmental projects. It has to matter. It would matter, Sarah said firmly. Dad, we could do so much good, David nodded. The technology applications alone, sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, efficient housing construction, the financial impact could be enormous, Michael added. But not just profit. Real change, real help for real people. We all looked at Margaret. She was quiet for a long time, studying each of our faces. 38 years, she said finally. 38 years I've been married to a man I thought I knew completely. And it turns out I didn't know him at all. My heart sank. Margaret, I didn't know, she continued, that my husband was brave enough to go to prison for his brother. I didn't know he was strong enough to start over with nothing. I didn't know he was wise enough to choose love over legacy, family over fortune. She moved to stand directly in front of me. I didn't know I was married to a hero. I'm not a hero, Margaret. I'm just a man who made the only choice he could live with. That's what makes you a hero, Harold, Henry, whoever you are. She reached up and touched my face. You're my husband. You've always been my husband. And if you want to take on this challenge, if you want our family to take it on together, then that's what we'll do. Even if it means leaving the farm sometimes. Even if it means Seattle society and board meetings and all the things we've avoided for 40 years. She smiled, and for the first time in years, it was the smile I'd fallen in love with when we were young. Especially if it means those things. Because I'm tired of playing it safe, Harold. I'm tired of small dreams and careful choices. If my husband can give up an empire and build another one, then his wife can handle a few charity galas. Sarah clapped her hands. So we're doing this. We're really doing this. We're doing this, I confirmed. But we're doing it as a family. No one person makes decisions for the rest. We succeed together, or we fail together. Michael stood up and extended his hand to me. Partners? I shook his hand, then pulled him into a hug. Partners. And Michael, I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I just forgot to say it enough. David joined the hug, then Sarah, and finally Margaret. We stood there in our living room, holding each other, and for the first time in years, we felt like a real family. That was 6 months ago. Today, as I sit in Jonathan's office, my office now, looking out at the Seattle skyline, I can honestly say that my life has become something I never expected, but always hoped for. The transition wasn't easy. There were board meetings where my overalls raised eyebrows, charity events where Margaret and I felt completely out of place, and family dinners where we still sometimes struggled to communicate honestly after decades of careful politeness. But we figured it out. We figured it out together. Margaret discovered that she has a gift for fundraising and event planning. Her Thursday art classes turned out to be excellent preparation for charming, wealthy donors and organizing galas that actually accomplish something meaningful. She's become the public face of our charitable initiatives, and she's better at it than Jonathan ever was. Michael left his job in Spokane and joined us as Chief Financial Officer. He says managing real money, money that builds affordable housing and funds scholarships and creates jobs, is infinitely more satisfying than helping rich people get richer. He's implemented financial strategies that have increased our charitable giving by 40% while still growing the business. David moved his startup into the Jameson Holdings building and is developing technology solutions for sustainable agriculture and renewable energy. David still speaks in buzzwords and gets excited about apps that can change the world. But now he's using those skills to actually change it. Sarah has become everything I knew she could be and more. As COO, she's tough in negotiations, compassionate with employees, and absolutely ruthless when it comes to companies that try to take advantage of workers. She's also engaged to a wonderful man who fell in love with her strength and intelligence, not her family's wealth. The orchards are still there, still producing apples, still managed by the same foreman who's worked for me for 20 years. I spend weekends there, getting my hands dirty and remembering who I was before I became who I am now. Some of our best family conversations happen under those apple trees, and some of our biggest business decisions are made while pruning branches and checking irrigation lines. We've expanded the agricultural scholarship program to include not just college tuition, but also support for young farmers who want to start their own operations. We've built 3 affordable housing developments in Washington and Oregon, with more planned for California and Idaho. Our renewable energy investments are not only profitable, but are actually making a measurable difference in carbon emissions. Most importantly, we've learned to see each other clearly. Margaret and I are in couples counseling, not because our marriage is in trouble, but because we want to build something honest after 38 years of partial truths and unspoken assumptions. My children ask me about my work now, really ask, and they listen to the answers. I ask them about theirs, and I understand now that their success doesn't diminish mine, it amplifies it. Last month we held a memorial service for Jonathan at the farm. We planted a new apple tree, a Gravenstein, like my old thinking tree, and invited everyone whose lives he'd touched. Workers from his construction projects came, scholarship recipients, employees who depended on him for their livelihoods. Eleanor spoke about the brother she'd lost and found again through his family. My children spoke about the uncle they'd never known, but whose sacrifices had shaped their father's character. Margaret spoke about forgiveness and the courage it takes to start over at any age. And I spoke about twin brothers who'd spent 43 years apart but had never really been separated. Because love and sacrifice create bonds that transcend death, distance, and even decades of misunderstanding. The best part of that day was when Sarah's fiancé asked me why we'd planted the tree at the farm instead of in Seattle, where Jonathan had lived his life. I told him it was because Jonathan's real legacy wasn't the buildings or the money or even the good works. His real legacy was the family that existed because of the choice he'd unknowingly inspired his brother to make all those years ago. When you save someone's life, you don't just save them. You save everyone they touch, everyone they help, everyone they love. You save the future they create and the legacy they leave behind. Jonathan saved my life by giving me a reason to sacrifice for something bigger than myself. And in return, I saved his by making sure that sacrifice meant something. If you've listened to this whole story, thank you. Stories like this one need to be told because they remind us that our families are more complex, more resilient, and more capable of change than we often give them credit for. They remind us that it's never too late to see the people we love clearly, and it's never too late to let them see us clearly in return. They remind us that sometimes the people who seem the simplest on the surface are carrying the deepest truths, and sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones with the most left to teach us. Please hit that like button if this story touched you in any way. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about real families and the secrets that shape us. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who might be struggling with their own family relationships or their own hidden truths. And remember, it's never too late to fly away in a helicopter, metaphorically speaking. It's never too late to reclaim who you really are, to demand that the people you love see you clearly, and to choose courage over comfort. Sometimes the last laugh really is the best laugh of all. Thanks for listening to my story. Now go create your own.